Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 1988 animated film, The Land Before Time. Now, The Land Before Time is one of those films that I wouldn't say was like one of my favorites growing up as a kid, but I did have it on VHS and I do remember watching it a handful of times. I liked it, and I still like the film. But there are other animated films, for younger audiences that I would say that I like more than this, and there's even some other Don Bluth films that I personally prefer over The Land Before Time, but I still think this is a really good film, especially when you consider the fact that this movie was, in a lot of ways, cut to shreds by Spielberg and by the studio. When you look at how there's like 10 to 15 minutes missing out of this movie, and there were a lot of things about it that were altered, including the entire climax. Those are things that definitely make this movie into something special, as well as a lot of other things about this film that still hold up after all these years. Now, before I get around to sharing more of my thoughts on the film, I want to give a special shout out to Ryan for requesting yet another review. And if there is another film, TV show, or topic that you would like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to either my PayPal, my Patreon, or my Cash App. The link to all three is in the video description down below, and I will try to get to your requests as soon as I possibly can. Now, The Land Before Time is directed by Don Bluth, who directed The Secret of Nim and American Tail and other films like All Dogs Go to Heaven, and he's considered to be one of the better animated directors of his time. And The Land Before Time is no exception. Once again, his direction is off the charts. It's incredible. It's astounding. The way that he frames his animation is really a sight to behold, and so is the way that he utilizes movement with the camera and the way the animation flows from scene to scene, and just the way that he utilizes atmosphere and mood, and the way that he evokes certain emotions from the animation itself, and his style, which is a little grittier, not as soft, not as typical sort of Disney style in comparison to some other Disney films from around the same time period. There is a certain sense of realism at points, but there's also a certain sense of uh, fun and uniqueness and charm to the animation, despite it having a little bit of an extra edge when it comes to the way that Don Bluth handles his animated films and the way that he directs them. So Bluth, to me, he's always been just a visionary and one of the most talented and genuinely one of a kind animated directors. And a big reason why this film works so well, despite the fact that it's a really short film and a lot of it is heavily focused on some really heavy emotions, is due to how Don directs the film, how he handles those emotions, how he showcases the animation in a genuinely harrowing and emotional and impactful fashion. Like there's a fair amount of shots in this that are simply breathtaking, and there's other shots in this that are genuinely thrilling and uh, have a certain sense of epic flair to them, but also shots that are very grounded and down to earth and find a way to connect on a deeper level with the audience and pull the heartstrings in a way that isn't too artificial or doesn't feel forced. So Dawn is just a master. His direction in this is very dynamic and very strong. And the film is written by Stu Krieger. Now, Stu Krieger is listed as the writer, but I believe there were some other writers that got involved at some point, either before the final script was put together or during production. Because I know that this was a concept and an idea that Don Bluth had in mind for a while, and he was, spitballing ideas back and forth, and he wanted to make a movie about dinosaurs that takes place 65 million years ago. And originally, the concept was something that was really generic and kind of bland. It dealt with the group of dinosaurs trying to find a wise old dinosaur on some kind of journey, almost like it was like Wizard of Oz with dinos. But then they decided, nah, we're not going to do that. We're going to go and have these dinosaurs be uh, more contentious with one another. Make a story that has some allegories and themes about racism and about the way that other races connect with each other or disconnect with each other, and have it be a story about that, but with dinosaurs, and a way to really discuss and talk about some of these deeper themes with younger audiences, but in a way that is entertaining and not just something that feels like it's preaching to a certain audience. And that is definitely something that really makes this script stand out in a lot of ways, is that it was willing to have those conversations and do it in a way that not only kids can understand, but even adults can grasp and find interesting. So it wasn't something that was too dumbed down. It actually had some things about it that were rather deep that as a kid I didn't even get, to be honest. But as an adult you watch it and you're like, "Oh, I see exactly what they're trying to go for here." With the three horns, don't play with long necks, that kind of stuff. And the whole way that all of these different dinos, these young dinosaurs, Littlefoot and Sarah and Ducky and Petrie, and they don't necessarily get along right away. That there's a certain animosity between some of them, and that it takes a while for them to become friends and trust each other. And that is something that is not necessarily completely unique, but when it comes to a lot of these kids films, a lot of these children's animated movies, it definitely wasn't something you saw that often. So I definitely appreciated that approach to storytelling as well. It also helped give it a little bit of extra added realism to it, which definitely helped. And the plot, it's very simple, very straightforward, but still fairly effective. It deals with these young dinosaurs having to find a way to survive and coexist with one another and find a way to the Great Valley, because they're separated from their parents after this great shift, which is an earthquake, which I think was supposed to represent like the tectonic plates shifting. So that happened and it separated these young dinosaurs from their parents. So now they have to work together in order to get to the Great Valley. And not only that, they also have to fend off this T Rex called Sharptooth, who is hunting them. So they have to find a way to find the Great Valley, but also find a way to defeat Sharptooth. Now, that is the main gist of the plot. And it works. But one of the elements of the script that is just so powerful and so strong is the emotion of it. And specifically what happens with Littlefoot and his mother when his mother dies fighting Sharptooth, and the way that Littlefoot deals with that grief, and how the script is actually willing to have these characters live in the grief, not just move past it really quickly. And that was something you didn't see that often in children's films, or in these kind of animated movies. And that's one of the things that definitely makes Don Bluth's work stand out from a lot of other animated films from around the same time, or even today, is that it's willing to have those slower moments, but they're moments that are supposed to carry a certain emotional weight. And there's a reason why a lot of people, when they think about this movie, they think about that scene with Littlefoot's mother and Littlefoot and her dying, and then Littlefoot dealing with that, and the scene between Littlefoot and old Rooter, which in my opinion is honestly one of the best scenes in the entire film. And it was added last minute because originally this wasn't in the script. This was something that was added when the original first version of the movie was finished, and there was a lot of contention and concern about it being a little too intense for children. So they actually hired a child therapist to look over the script, and I think watch an early cut of the movie, and that's why Rooter was thrown in. And it's just something that makes the film so much more powerful and makes the message of it so much more stronger. This is really one of the best films that I've seen about handling and dealing with grief and loss. And it's a kids' movie. It's a children's animated film because of this exchange between Rooter and Littlefoot, as well as other things. But this is really honestly the scene that really solidifies it, where Rooter is rooting around and he's all like, "Hey, what's going on here?" And Littlefoot is crying, "What's your problem? You're not hurt." "It's not fair. She should have known better. That was a sharp tooth. It's all her fault." "All whose fault?" "Mother's." "Oh, I see. I see. I've never wandered so far from home." "Oh, it's not your fault. It's not your mother's fault. Now, you pay attention to old Rooter. It is nobody's fault. The great circle of life has begun. But see, not all of us arrive together at the end. What'll I do? I miss her so much." "And you'll always miss her. But she'll always be with you, as long as you remember the things she taught you. In a way, you'll never be apart, for you are still part of each other." So that is just it's a really poignant scene, to be honest. So there's actually a lot of poignant scenes in this that are really strong. There are some funny bits, like little goofy back and forth between the dinos. There's some cute stuff with Ducky that can, bring a smile to your face. There's some of the stuff with Petrie. I won't say that it's particularly that memorable when it comes to its comedy. I wasn't laughing that often, smirking, maybe chuckling a couple times, but it's not the best when it comes to that kind of stuff, but I don't really feel that that was really the intent of this script or this story. I think it was more focused on the emotional aspect of things, the whole race relation stuff, the message of it, and also the tension and the suspense. And the scenes with Sharptooth are really suspenseful. They're full of a fair amount of tension. They originally were even more intense, but Spielberg didn't like that and thought it would be too scary for kids, so it was cut down. One problem I do have with this script, though, is its ending. And it's because of the fact that so much stuff was changed last minute that it causes continuity issues. So the film has the dinosaurs be born, and at least Sarah and Littlefoot and Ducky, and then they are, doing their own thing. And Littlefoot and his mother and his grandfather and his grandmother, they're trying to get to the Great Valley. The Sharptooth shows up and kills his mother, and then the great shift happens, and Littlefoot gets separated from his grandparents, and Sarah separated from her parents, and so is Ducky. Littlefoot winds up running into Ducky later, and Ducky agrees to join Littlefoot on his journey to try to find the Great Valley. They also run into Sarah and Petrie and Spike along the way. And I will say that when it comes to the different personalities or different character arcs for these dinosaurs, some of them are definitely better than others. Littlefoot's is definitely the strongest one. Petrie's, I think, is like a close second. Ducky, there really isn't much of an arc for her. And Sarah, the way that things go with her arc, I don't really care for. But I'll get to that a little bit later. Because now we get to the finale, where Sharptooth is back and he's going after the dinosaurs, and they have to find a way to defeat him and then get to the Great Valley. Well, the only reason why all this is happening is because Sarah went her own way, which is the wrong way. And then Littlefoot went, well, she went the wrong way along with Littlefoot and everybody else. So actually, no, Littlefoot went on his own. Sarah went the wrong way, but then Littlefoot decided to turn around and go and help his friends. And they wind up rescuing Sarah from these other dinosaurs. But then Sharptooth shows up, and then they have to team up together to defeat Sharptooth. They eventually do, and then wind up finding the Great Valley, and that's the end of the story. Well, it keeps mentioning that Sarah's going the wrong way, but why? How would she know that? Why would she know that she's going the wrong way? The only person that was established to know where the Great Valley was Littlefoot. Well, that's because in the original script, Littlefoot went out on his own, separate from his friends, and he found the Great Valley. And then when he was like playing in the waterfalls and really enraptured and just in awe of the Great Valley, he snapped out of it. And then he was like, "Wait, I need to find my friends. They need to know where the great. I need to take them here. And they went the wrong way, and they could be in danger." So then he goes back and finds his friends and helps them, and gets them away from the volcano and the other dinosaurs, and then they go together to find the Great Valley. Well, there's an added bit of tension now because Sharptooth knows where the Great Valley is. So now the Littlefoot and his friends, it's a race against time. They have to find a way to defeat Sharptooth and take him down before he finds the Great Valley and eats their parents and ruins everything for everybody. And that's when they team up and they use their wits and their smarts and wind up using the boulder and knocking the sharp tooth into the water. And then they go to the Great Valley together. Well, Spielberg and other producers felt that that was derivative and unnecessary, so they demanded last minute script changes, and it really shows. It's very obvious that this wasn't the intended way that this film was initially supposed to end. It still works, but I do feel that the original ending was better. Because that added bit of tension where Sharptooth knows where the Great Valley is, that makes things even better when it comes to the climax. That adds an extra element that it doesn't have otherwise. Plus, it fixes the continuity error. It fixes the issues like, oh, you see the boulder there when you're not supposed to. Like, wait a second, they used the boulder already to knock the T-Rex into the water. Why is that boulder still there? Now, I mentioned earlier when I was talking about this script and this story that I have a bone to pick, so to speak, with the character of Sarah. And I really do. That character is very unlikable, very selfish. And I know that's the point. She's stubborn, she's headstrong, she is very delusional in terms of what she is capable of, and was born without any fear, but also with not as much common sense, that kind of stuff. But the character doesn't have much of an arc. The character doesn't ultimately change her ways in the end. Yeah, she does find new friends and she decides to help them defeat the Sharptooth at the end of the movie, but there's never a moment where she pauses or she reflects or she realizes that she was being mean and did the wrong thing and apologizes to her friends or apologizes a Littlefoot or has that moment where she just shifts when it comes to her mindset and learns from her mistakes, and she gets rewarded for her stubbornness with this big moment where she's the one that delivers the final blow to the boulder that sends the sharp tooth into the water. So it's like she gets this hero moment. And I don't necessarily feel it's the most deserved because she never really changes that much as a character. There's little things that are really uh in my opinion kind of holding back this script from being spectacular, but for the most part, I think this is still a really good script, especially for a children's movie, because of the strength of how it handles the emotions, and because there's actually a fair amount of scenes that are rather intense and suspenseful. And there's a good sense of fun to it and camaraderie between the different dinosaurs. And they do make a fun group of oddballs. And I genuinely feel that this is a story and a script that, despite a lot of the things that were cut out, it still works in the end. But I really wish we could have seen the original vision that Don Bluth and company had for this, not Spielberg's vision, because that's really what you got. Is Spielberg was like, "Hey, I don't like this, so change this," and I think that's honestly too bad, because in my opinion, Don Bluth had earned the right to be able to stand by his work. The people behind this film had earned the right to stand by what they made and just release it as is. If that meant it was PG, so be it. A good film is a good film, and it still probably would have done fairly well in the box office if it was rated PG versus rated G. I know there's a lot of uh, um, disagreement about that, even from Don himself. Like he said things like, "Oh, well, I don't think it would have been as successful if it was PG," but I don't know about that. It's a kids movie about dinosaurs. Like dinosaurs are massively popular. Like that I don't really feel that this would have been like necessarily a lesser successful film if it was released and finished and completed the way that the writers and the director intended it to. But that's just me personally. Now, the film features a really strong, a really good voice cast. You have Pat Hingle, who is the narrator, and he also voices Rooter. And it's some of his better work as an actor. You have Gabriel Damon, Hob himself from RoboCop 2 as Littlefoot. I did not know that. After all these years, I did not know that the psycho kid who's like shooting people up with guns and doing nuke in RoboCop 2 was the voice of Littlefoot in The Land Before Time. He did a great job. And you have Candace Hutson, who voices Sarah. You got Burke Burns, who voices her father. Judith Barsi is Ducky in sadly, one of her last roles because of just an absolutely tragic and just awful story. Because she was murdered. It's so tragic and so sad. And you also have Helen Shaver, who voices Littlefoot's mother. In my opinion, she's an incredibly underrated actress. I really like her. Um, and it's wonderful that she had a contribution to this. And then you also have Bill Irwin, who voices the grandfather, and Will Ryan, who voices Petrie. Now, Will Ryan, it, the way he voices this character reminds me of Plucky Duck from Tiny Toon Adventures, but he never that he wasn't the voice of Plucky Duck, but it has that same kind of vibe. But yeah, really good, really genuinely a solid voice cast. It also features some good editing by John K. Carr and Dan Molina. And the animation quality is amazing. It is just some really great looking animation, which is something that is very much the norm for Don Bluth at the time. You could argue that this is the last that you would see of prime Don Bluth, but I will defend Anastasia. And I really like Titan AE as well, so I would defend that too. But yeah, after this, things kind of started to go downhill a little bit. But I do like All Dogs Go to Heaven a lot as well. So to be fair, I don't think that this was like the last that, we saw of like the best of Don Bluth. But you could argue that, okay, this is the point when things got more commercialized and the tone of his films started to shift because of the fact that they were focused more on making them commercially and financially successful than necessarily just allowing Don and his team to just make what they wanted to make and make the films that they felt were the best representations of what they had in mind and what they were the most passionate about. The music by James Horner, it's really good. Honestly, I would say it's one of his better scores. It fits the tone of the film very well. It has a certain sense of majesty and magic to it, and really emphasized and really elevated the more emotional scenes in the film. So, yeah, Land Before Time to me, it is still for the most part a classic. I I feel that it is absolutely one of the better kids movies, animated films from around this time period, and in general, I do feel that it could have been a little bit better, but a lot of my issues with this film are just nitpicks. They don't really affect the film that much at the end of the day. But yeah, that's my thoughts on The Land Before Time. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later. See ya.